Hey, this video is something that is a little bit off the cuff because I just watched a video by another music producer on YouTube by the name of Venus Theory, and he did a video called "There's a Pretty Dark Problem with the Music Industry." And he called for a bit of response on that video, so I just thought that I would add my perspective on it. First of all, I want to say huge props to Venus Theory for having the courage to talk about something as important as this, and for not just giving us more, content that is just purely there for filler, but actually engaging in a conversation about something serious. Alright, so I'll just respond to a couple of the points that Venus Theory made. So firstly, he talked about the idea that the music industry is pretty messed up. Well, this is a pretty commonly known fact. The music theory is pretty messed up. And it may be messed up in a slightly different way today, but it was still messed up 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago. And this is because the music industry, sadly, has always been about exploitation. It's been about the exploitation of artists. Artists are complex people, have different desires and wants, but a part of being human is that we want what we perceive as success. And that can come in the form of money, it can come in the form of being liked, being loved. And when we look at musicians who are operating at the highest level, we see people who are loved because they make music. Because music produces something that is more than who we are. Because music is such wonderfully expressed emotion, it can make people feel something that you could never make them feel otherwise. And so music ascends a person beyond what they are. And we see that and we think, wow, musicians are loved. These super huge musicians. It's not even so much today. It's lesser today than it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Back then, musicians were admired like demigods. Nowadays, it's a bit lessened, but the principle is still there. We admire people, and that's where the fame aspect comes in. And so because of these things, because of this perception that, through being a musician, I can be famous, I can be rich, I can have lots of sex, all of these kinds of things, it becomes a desirable industry. Now look, I'm not saying that that's what most or all musicians are after, but there is certainly a big driving force, I think, especially for young musicians, to want to have those things. And that's the story that the music industry sells you. And this is where the music industry is exploitative, because it preys on those desires in people in order to use them for what the industry can get out of them. It takes talent that young people have, typically young people, it's typically young musicians that this is the case for. It takes their talent and it uses it so that the record companies, the producers, they can make a lot of money out of it, and well, the artist is left with whatever dregs are left over. And all we have to do is look at some of those recording contracts to see how utterly ridiculous the music industry is. So look, I have no debate about the fact that the music industry is exploitative. It is, and today it's just a little bit different because now you can create music at home, in your bedroom, and you can create music that is as good as anything that's out there in the wider world just at home on your computer. And what that's done is opened up the music world to everybody getting their music out there. At one point, the only way to have your music out there was to get signed to a label. You paid your dues and you did the work, you got signed to a label, and your music was put out there, which meant that there was some degree of limitation to the amount of music that was out there. which I think was actually a good thing, because now there's an oversaturation. And just like Venus Theory said, there's so much music that is just not being heard. And the sad thing is that it's a lot of the very best artists out there who are not being heard. Because it's more about the artists that you hear are the ones who are better at marketing, are better at promoting themselves. And often the real artists, the really good artists, they're not marketers, they're not promoters, they're just musicians. They make good music. But to be successful in this era is more about your ability to promote yourself, which means that the music that we're hearing today is generally not the best. It's not the best music that's out there. The very best music that's out there will be sitting in dark, dusty corners of the internet on servers with, in SoundCloud libraries somewhere where there's only a dozen songs, and they will be amazing. But how do you find them? And this is one of the big issues about the music industry today. So the next thing that I want to address is that Venus Theory talked about how musicians are struggling, perceived as struggling artists. And this has always been the case. Anybody who works in a creative field, artists, sculptors, musicians, and so on, they're always kind of struggling because, creative industries, how do you value them? It's utterly bizarre. If you look at the art world and you go, well, how do you value art? Well, I could take a bunch of paint and squiggle it on a canvas and then muck it all up and put it on a wall, and you might say it's not worth anything. But when Jackson Pollock does it, it's worth millions of dollars. So how do you gauge the value of something? If I go to a job as whatever and I put in X hours of work, we've agreed upon a wage or a salary that I'm going to receive for the hours input. Now, if you take two workers, the quality of work that they do in that given time, let's say they work 40 hours a week, you can have one person who produces this level of quality right up here in terms of the work that they do in 40 hours. And then the other one that works the same period of time, works the same 40 hours, is producing this quality of work. So, yeah, there is variation in the value that's being added. But in the creative world, it's even more difficult to define, because what is that? What is that value that you're adding? Like, you might say, well, Drake is producing huge value. Well, yeah, for his record label he is, because they're selling albums, but that's because they promote that as well. They have to put a huge investment into that music to make it grow and to make it financially viable. But you take another artist, they might make no money from their music, but the actual value that they add to, I guess, the culture of our time is significantly more, because they invent something new, they bring about something really different, and they add to the music world. And I'll give you a simple example, right? So let's take any pop music, any pop artist that you want, right? Britney Spears, Beyonce, Rihanna, whoever, right? Now, let's compare the music that they've made and the value that adds to society with an artist called Burial. If you haven't heard Burial, you need to go and listen to Burial, because Burial is amazing. I think he's only done like 2-3 albums, and he brought out his second album, Untrue, in 2007, and it is renowned as an album that absolutely changed the music world because it added so much. It invented a new style of music, basically. Future Garage, or there's different names as to what it was, actually the origins of dubstep, all this kind of stuff, came from Burial and a few other artists around the time like him. So in terms of contribution of what they've added to the music world, if I go, oh, Beyonce or Rihanna or whoever, what have they added to the music world? As far as I'm concerned, very little. And what has Burial added to the music world? Wow, an amazing thing is what he's added to the music world. He's added a new genre, a new style, a new way of looking at and a new way of creating music. From my perspective, there's no comparison in terms of the value added to the music world. But we're not talking here about financial value, because here's the trick, right? Is Rihanna, Beyonce, Britney Spears, they're fucking rich. They have shitloads of money that they've made from their music. Burial, I would doubt that he has become rich off his music. I doubt very much that Burial is living in a mansion somewhere, because so many people haven't even really heard of him, right? But his contribution to music in an ongoing way is just so much more. So value is messed up in the music world. It's totally messed up, because what the music industry values is totally different from what is objectively valuable to a contribution to the music world. So anyway, kind of rambling on a little bit about that. On that same note though, talking about success, I mean, what is the metric of success? Success is a difficult one, because modern society measures success in the size of your house, how big your TV is, you know, how fancy your car is, what kind of suits you wear, how much money you have. Basically, money is largely the metric of success. But really, I mean, you know, I can think of some extremely successful, wealthy people, and I wouldn't want to be them. You know, I wouldn't want to be them because of kind of who they are. People who are purely just driven by money. I mean, there must be a hollow and empty existence. What's your deathbed experience when you arrive there? Oh, I made loads of money. Whoop-de-doo. You know, money exists to provide you with a lifestyle. And whatever that lifestyle is, if you have enough money to have that lifestyle, then isn't that success? I mean, from my perspective, success is what I can use my talents for. So musically, it's about, I want to create some music that is original, that is interesting, that gives people, you know, at least a certain portion of people some enjoyment, and something that is maybe inspiring, that maybe touches them. That's what I'm looking for from music, and the inner satisfaction that gives me. So success is just such a ephemeral thing to try and describe and to detail about what, you know, what success looks like. But in terms of, you know, measuring yourself, gauging yourself on all these metrics like Venus Theory was talking about, if you're on YouTube or if you're on SoundCloud or whatever, how many listens you get, how many watches, likes, all these things. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of redundant in a way. I mean, you know, I can't imagine that when you're lying on your deathbed, you'll go, oh, I lived my life because I got 100,000 likes on that video one time. You know, that's not what you're going to be thinking. Well, I hope it's not, when you're lying on your deathbed, right? So, and this is, you know, this is the great test. I think this is the ultimate test if you're determining, should you do the thing that you're thinking of doing, and it's a significant life decision. The deathbed test is a great test. Is to picture yourself when you're lying on your deathbed and you look back upon this decision. Will you be glad that you made it? Will you be happy that you took a risk? Or will you regret having spent all your time doing something that you didn't love? That's a big one. So talking about saturation, of the market saturation. So yeah, part of the problem that we have with the music industry now is that there's just such an oversaturation of the market. There's so much music out there that it is very difficult to find music. And also it means that in terms of the bell curve, the overall quality of music has gone down if you're looking at the average, right? Because everybody has access to being able to make music, and because due to the Dunning-Kruger effect, there's a lot of people who think that they're really good at making music, but aren't. They aren't good at making music, and their music is kind of shit. And so because of that, you get this massive amount of music that floods the market that is just not very good. And what it does is it compresses out the ability for you to find that truly wonderful music, that really amazing music that will be out there. So this is, I think, one of the biggest difficulties, is that we have this kind of open market, which is great that everybody now can make music, but it also makes it way more difficult for professional musicians, for musicians who are truly serious about their music and are truly serious about making something new and original. It makes it way more difficult for them to get their music out there. And then often you might have a person who does make some really shit music, but is really good at promoting it. They're just so good at promotional skills that they are promoting their own crap music. And that gets heard. You get to hear their crap music. Awesome! What a benefit that was. Wouldn't it be great if those people with all those fantastic promotional skills were promoting the music of someone who was actually really good and making music that can potentially have an impact on society and on the musical world, and that it can really touch people and add something new. So, brings me on to probably the most important point about Venus Theory's video. So let's move on to the meat of really, I think, of what Venus Theory had to say. I think the most important thing, and that is that if you're looking for success from the people out there who maybe are your SoundCloud listeners, your Instagram followers, or whatever, you are ultimately going to be disappointed. You should only really look for success inside yourself, your own personal satisfaction with what you're doing. If you do not glean your satisfaction from the creative act of making your music, you will not ultimately be happy. You need to be satisfied with what you're doing, with how you're spending your time as a musician. And that is about songwriting. If you are just getting so much out of songwriting, when you have mixed your songs and you've mastered your songs and you can listen back to your songs, if you get this great sense of satisfaction, this is the most satisfying thing for me. Sure, I want other people to hear my music. Absolutely, of course I do. But I get a huge amount of satisfaction from listening to my own music. And that is huge, you know, to be able to listen to it, to be able to go, yeah, I like it, I enjoy it, and you know, I'm really glad that I spent my time doing this. So that's for whatever you're doing in life. Doesn't matter if you're a musician or if you're an artist or if you're a concrete layer. You know, if you can glean satisfaction from what you're doing, not just the paycheck that you're taking home or someone patting you on the back, but actually from the act of doing the thing, that's success. That's where you're going to have the greatest happiness. And I mean, this is universally true. This is not just the case for music. Whatever you're doing in life, you should be able to get joy from it, to get joy from what you're doing. You know, that's why hobbies exist. I mean, oftentimes people work for what they have to do, and then they go and they do their hobby, if it's yoga or building toy trains or, you know, whatever it is. As long as you get that satisfaction from it, then you can be happy. But if the moment you start looking for happiness outside of yourself, you've punched a losing ticket. It's not going to be the greatest thing. So chasing vanity metrics, a bad idea. I mean, these metrics can be useful. They can be a useful tool. But if you're constantly checking to see if you've got more followers or more likes or whatever, then that could be an issue. So yeah, in short, make what you love, do what you love, take a step back from your life and try and observe it from a third-person perspective and ask yourself, you know, is this the life that you want to lead? And look, ultimately, we can't be happy all the time. That's not what being a human is about. If you're happy all the time, you're probably a moron, because the thing is, the more you know about the world, the less easy it is to be happy, because the world is kind of a fucked up place in so many ways. So you have to be able to find your happiness. You have to be able to find your joy in life as opposed to expecting it to come to you, you know? We don't receive $1 million checks in the mail. It just doesn't happen. You've got to go out there and make it happen, and you need to enjoy the journey, because the destination is very short, but the journey, that's your life, right? So learn to enjoy that journey and learn to make the journey the thing and not the destination, the perceived destination. And don't get me wrong, it is good to have goals, but I think it's good to have short-term goals where you know, oh yeah, I can achieve this thing, and then I can achieve this thing, and get satisfaction from those things. But if it's like, if your goal is, oh, I want to be super famous and live in a massive big mansion and have 60 cars, that's, you know, maybe that'll happen. That's a long-term goal. That can't be the only thing on your mind. Anyways, that's just some of the thoughts that I've had about this, pretty much just off the cuff. I just watched the video about an hour ago, and so I just thought I'd add this in. So there we go. Signing off. Like the video, subscribe to my channel, all that kind of stuff. Leave your comments down below about what you think about this whole thing, and take it easy.